and welcome to the launch of the DLN white paper on transdisciplinarity that will be followed by a panel debate led by Roger afterwards, as Kam just said. The outline of the, I will try to do like this. The outline of the presentation will be as follows. I will start with a some brief information about the context for the white paper before we will look more into the meanings of inter and transdisciplinarity. And then we will look at 3 key findings of this report and then go to the recommendations. As part of the research program Biotech 2021, the Research Council of Norway launched the strategic initiative Digital Life Convergence for Innovation, which was an attempt to, and I quote, create a transformative and long-lasting effect on biotechnological research and innovation in Norway. And this document, that is the Convergence for Innovation document, calls for increased collaboration between disciplines inside and outside of academia, and also focusing on the concept of transdisciplinarity. And as you can see here, the aim of the Digital Life Initiative is to create economic, societal, and environmental value in Norway from biotechnological research and innovation by encouraging transdisciplinary research. So, in 2015, as a part of the Digital Life Initiative, the Center of Digital Life Norway was established. The DLN mission was to create a vibrant, networked, transdisciplinary digital life community in Norway. And the first funding period of DLN was 5 years, and halfway into this period, then the DLN project Respublica, together with the DLN networking project, which was the leadership of the center, organized this search conference in Selbu that many of you probably have heard about, or you were there, that where the plan was to stake out the course of the remaining period of DLN. And a lot of things were discussed there, but in this context, what is important is that it was identified a clear need to clarify the meaning and significance of transdisciplinarity in DLN. So therefore, in 2020, there was established a task force, which I was hired to lead. And this task force consisted of me and Roger, and also Trygve was a part of that, acting as an advisor in the process. And the point of this work was not to evaluate digital life. It was not to evaluate the efforts, transdisciplinary efforts, but it was to look at these efforts in the center, what had been done, to analyze them, and then also to see them in light of the extensive scholarship on inter and transdisciplinarity that exists. So, our approach, or like the report, this white paper, is guided by this research question: what does transdisciplinarity mean in Digital Life Norway? And our approach was threefold. So we did a literature review on existing scholarship on inter and transdisciplinarity, and then we analyzed events and activities under the heading of transdisciplinarity. And thirdly, we did a round of focus group interviews and also some individual interviews in each of the 4 big cities, so Tromsø, Trondheim, Oslo, and Bergen. And now, referring to this first part, like the literature review of existing scholarship, now I'm going to look more closely at these concepts. As I'm sure you know, there are many concepts out there, multi, inter, cross, trans. There are many words out there that are frequently used interchangeably. But now we will just learn this, and now you will know for the future. So take notes. So multidisciplinarity first. It is a juxtaposition of disciplines with multiple disciplinary goals under one thematic umbrella. So disciplines working within disciplines with a thematic umbrella, right? And then interdisciplinarity, it's a more integrated effort so it's interaction between one or more disciplinary fields aiming for a mutual integration of methods, of data, and of conceptual concepts. So its integration here is key when we talk about interdisciplinarity. And then we have transdisciplinarity, which designates a more comprehensive collaborative effort than multi and interdisciplinarity. So therefore, we're going to have a closer look at this. So in transdisciplinarity, the aim is to integrate different disciplinary knowledges, like in interdisciplinarity, but trans, however, signifies something more that goes beyond, that transcends, transgresses interaction between the disciplines. So usually the prominent transgressive ingredient in transdisciplinarity is that it takes on board experience-based knowledge. So this experience-based knowledge may come from industry, it comes from users, it can come from citizens or other relevant publics. This means that this third bullet point, the transdisciplinary knowledge, in this sense means knowledge that transcends what can be known by the academic world. And this is, as you can understand, quite different from interdisciplinarity. And I will not stop there, because when we talk about transdisciplinarity, we also need to say something about convergence, because it is very often used as a synonym to transdisciplinarity, or together, transdisciplinary convergence, for instance, you can hear. And first, I want to say it's not the same, but it's, of course, in some ways similar. Convergence is collaboration within the sciences, like interdisciplinarity, but with the goal of dissolving the borders between disciplines. And that is not necessarily the goal of transdisciplinarity, because there you work across the borders, not dissolving the borders completely. And furthermore, convergence does not necessarily involve this experience-based knowledge. So that is the distinction. But for now, we're going to just focus on inter- and transdisciplinarity, interdisciplinarity, collaboration within the sciences, transdisciplinarity, also with the inclusion of non-academic actors. So, what is important to understand when we're talking about inter- and transdisciplinary research politics, like now, or research policy, is that these policies are guided by a set of underlying assumptions and scholarship. I'm going to go here now. Scholarship on inter- and transdisciplinarity has identified 3 problematic assumptions made both in science and policy discourses on inter- and transdisciplinarity. And I have listed them here, and I'm sure you will recognize these either from policies or maybe from your own ideas about trans and interdisciplinarity. So the first one is interdisciplinary knowledge is better than disciplinary knowledge. The second assumption is that disciplines are silos that constrain the development of interdisciplinary knowledge. And thirdly, and the third underlying assumption is that interdisciplinary interactions are unconstrained by the status hierarchies and power asymmetries that operate within disciplines. And the concern here is not that these necessarily are wrong, even though scholarship show that they also are wrong sometimes. But the concern here is that researchers and policymakers too often take these for granted. And this is important, according to scholars, because this has impeded systematical critical reflection and also close empirical examination of the political values underpinning calls for interdisciplinarity. And these values are interesting and important because they are often also tacit, they are often taken for granted, even though they are very significant and influential in research policies. So now that we have established that, we can move on to the 3 main findings of this report. First, Regarding the research question, what has the word transdisciplinarity come to mean in DLN? So we encountered 3 understandings of transdisciplinarity. So the first one is that transdisciplinarity is interdisciplinary collaboration within the natural sciences. So that would equal what we just learned is actually interdisciplinarity. This was the most prominent understanding in the center. Secondly, was that transdisciplinarity was collaboration with disciplines far from your own, very often between, or it was imagined as between social sciences and humanity, social sciences and natural sciences, for instance, and often, but not always, referred to as collaboration with the RRI people. And thirdly, some also had the understanding of transdisciplinarity as something more that also includes non-academic actors, or like, yeah, other actors. So our main conclusion is that the initiatives and or most events and activities that we analyzed in the center can be considered interdisciplinary initiatives that aimed at increasing collaboration between the scientists in the center. And also that it's been quite successful in doing so in many levels. So the second finding, which I think is important, is that there are some unintended consequences of interdisciplinarity in practice. And in particular for early career researchers, the challenge is that early career researchers, and especially within the numerical and modeling sciences, who also work on temporary contracts, are particularly vulnerable for delays in the experimental part. So I'm sure you have met this challenge if you have been working in a project either, because when you organize, or when research projects are organized in these work packages in a pipeline that follows each other, it's no surprise that if the biologists has some problems with their data that creates delays, then the bioinformaticians won't necessarily get their data in time, and then they have a problem if they're finishing their postdoc in 1 year. So these kind of problematic, and I think these are important to think about because we so often talk about all the great things about interdisciplinarity, but there are also some unintended consequences. And also relating to risks and time costs of interdisciplinary work, which is not novel, this is known, but still it's an important finding for us and in digital life context. The third finding is that we found that, or the accounts of scientists from the interviews suggest a potential for aligning transdisciplinarity better with the other focus areas in Digital Life Norway. So the other focus areas are innovation, industry collaboration, digitalization, and RRI. And especially we saw that RRI and innovation were the 2 most discussed focus areas in relation to transdisciplinarity. So I think also that we saw that RRI and transdisciplinarity has some potential of thinking these 2 together and not as separate focus areas, but to try to integrate them more. That was the 3 findings. And now I'm going to move on to the last slide, which is recommendations. And what I want to say about these is that our recommendations are conditional. We take it not to be our role to decide what DLN should do in its second funding period, because that seems to be the task for the DLN's various executive and governing bodies. But these are our recommendations. Firstly, to raise conceptual awareness, and in particular to distinguish between inter and transdisciplinarity, but because as we have seen, they are not synonyms, and it's actually a bit important to know what we are talking about if we want, what kind of collaboration is it that DLN aim for, and also Norwegian biotechnology in general, not only within the DLN. And secondly, we recommend to meet the particular challenges of interdisciplinary research projects and their unintended consequences, especially for early career researchers. This is something that needs to be taken seriously, also because it's the early career researchers with temporary positions that don't have a lot of power often in their positions. So this is something to think about. Thirdly, we recommend to decide on the meaning and role of transdisciplinarity in DLN. And then, depending on what is decided, we then recommend that if the choice is to develop more transdisciplinary research, then required expertise is likely to be called for, and also as well as inclusion of more non-academic actors, not merely as stakeholders, but also as knowledge holders. So that are our recommendations. And now, that is the end of the presentation. Thank you.